Today I am speaking with Sara BhaduriHauck. Sara, she, her, is a certified birth, bereavement and postpartum doula and a certified lactation counselor with a professional background in biological sciences and education. She lives with her 4 children, her husband and a menagerie of dogs and cats on a small farm in southeastern York Country, Pennsylvania. Sara has been providing her services in her private practice, Mandala Motherhood, for 3 years. In addition to this, she also works under the umbrella of a non-profit she founded last year called Rooted Willow Community, which is a small organisation offering free and low-cost support groups and connection and educational-oriented resources to new families. To learn more about Sara and her private practice, you can find the information via the links below. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Welcome to the Whole Doula podcast. The Whole Doula podcast is a conversation space for doulas and birth workers to talk about the diverse paths that led them to birth work, as well as the diverse and unique skills, interests and offerings they bring to their birth-keeping roles. Here I dive into conversations with others who may be wondering how to bring the different aspects and experiences of their own lives into their roles as doulas in business. After all, there is more than one way to doula, and I'd love to help others see the connections between all the different parts of themselves, to see themselves as a whole doula. I am your host, Mary Giordano, doula, birth educator, counsellor, and doula business mentor, and this is the Whole Doula podcast. I hope you enjoy listening. Good morning and welcome to the Whole Doula podcast, Sara. So lovely to meet you.
Thank you. You as well, Mary.
So can you tell me a little bit about your journey? Or firstly, actually tell me what sort of doula you are, how you refer to yourself as a birth worker, whether in fact you refer to yourself as a doula or otherwise, and why?
Sure. Yeah. And that's something I kind of struggle with because I entered the world of birth work as a postpartum doula, primarily because my life did not allow me to attend births. I have 4 small children of my own, so scheduling is a big sticky point for me. So postpartum doula is where I started, and now my work is really much more all-encompassing than that. So sometimes I call myself a perinatal anthropologist because that seems kind of more of what I'm doing. Sometimes I call myself a postpartum coach because I tend to lean more that way. In general, doula is fine because most people know what that means, and anything that gets more nuanced, if you're outside of the birth community, the meanings kind of get lost on people. So it kind of depends on who I'm talking to. Doula suits me fine.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. I'm particularly curious about the title that you sometimes use or refer to yourself as a perinatal anthropologist. Could you maybe just, if you feel that you could extrapolate on that and just explain how that one sort of came to you, if you have an interest in anthropology or a background in anthropology? And if not,
I don't. In fact, it was my partner that works on the nonprofit with me. Her name is Erica. She coined this term because we were trying to determine what is it that we're actually doing. We're building something new and different that we really have not seen in our community or anywhere close to us remotely. And I'm just fascinated by the transition to parenthood. So not only the physiologic processes of birth and labor and supporting someone through that kind of physical journey, but really all of the changes, like the biochemical changes, the emotional changes, the spiritual changes, like all encompassing that happens when people become parents. For me, it's much more than just supporting people through the experience of birth. It's really a huge life transformation. That's a rite of passage, and people come out the other side permanently changed. And for a lot of families, I see this as very disorienting because it's not something that they expected. It's not something they were told to prepare for, and it's not something that they're seeing, even if you do the hire a doula thing. And I believe that a lot of doulas get to this in the heart of their work, but it's not something that consumers of the birth, what the birth community is offering, kind of have in mind. It blindsides a lot of people. And I started as a postpartum doula wanting to help people in those first days and weeks, and realized what I really wanted to do was help people navigate this huge transition. And so I do kind of what a doula does, but I also step back and do something that's so much more.
So tell me about the nonprofit. You mentioned you founded that with somebody else. What's the name of the nonprofit?
It's called Rooted Willow Community, and my partner's name is Erica Waski. And it happened quite organically, in fact, because I I had started a postpartum support group for moms. It was right after COVID, and people were really feeling isolated, and they were ready to get back and start connecting with other humans. And there really wasn't anything in my community for people to come together and find other people in the same walk of life, right? And so I just happened to meet Erica on Facebook while I was collecting, interest for this group. She was working for another community nonprofit at the time, doing similar kind of work. And she started coming from the very beginning. And so she's been an integral partner, even though we kind of met happenstance as I was starting this on my own. She's been an integral partner in the development. For the first couple of months, we offered this free of charge every single week, and it quickly exploded. The interest was phenomenal, and it got away from us. It was more than we could handle. And there was a really crucial decision point where we had to decide, are we going to monetize this and charge people to come, or are we going to try to do something different and find funding from a different source? And that is ultimately what we chose, because that was the way to reach the goals of improving access for people, and initiating peer support networks and really getting people connected with the birth community, but more so with each other. And the nonprofit was born from that need. I was quite resistant at the beginning because it's a lot of work, and I didn't really want to do the back end work. Erica and I both come from a background in education, and curriculum and program development is where we shine, and that's what we wanted to do. And this was the way to accomplish it. So we did, and we founded in March of 2022. So it's been just 18 months ish that we've been official, and things are moving and shaking. And another reason that I hesitate to do I still call myself a doula? Because a lot of the work that I'm doing now is in this community sphere, and I'm still seeing some clients, but the bulk of my work has kind of taken me back into the community.
And is that satisfying for you?
It is.
Yeah.
It's lovely and wonderful. And when I came to birth work after being home with my children for a few years, I wanted to start something new. I wanted to try, I wanted to fuel my passion, and I wanted to help people. And I started as more of like a service provider. It was kind of how I see a lot of doulas and lactation professionals, helping people with this specific service. And as I continued to do the work, I realized where I was gravitating towards was that program development piece, like looking at these bigger challenges, like what is happening in our community, what is happening with the culture around new parenthood, and how can we change that? Because that's really where my passion stems, is how do we change the culture around early parenthood? I can offer services to new parents, but if they don't want to if they don't want to hire me, if they don't want to take these things, or they're not connecting with these resources, why is that? And how can we help those people kind of come into the circle of support, even if they're not seeking service providers for themselves? That big disconnect for me between what people were saying they wanted and needed and what they were actually showing up to and paying for. And that bigger question of how do we bridge that gap, and how do we increase access and remove barriers in ways that will make people access what is being offered more than they are with the current model. That's really what it is inspiring and invigorating for me. And I can do that through program development and under the umbrella of this nonprofit.
Amazing. So many things I want to unpack there. So just let me think for a second. So you mentioned to change the culture of new parenthood. How would you describe the current culture, or the culture that you would like to see change?
I think for me, the biggest lack is people not valuing themselves enough to do what it is that they need to do to feel good in early parenthood. I see so much materialism in our culture, baby showers that focus on physical gifts. And of course that's important, but at the exclusion of everything else. And I see that parents preparing by, putting together a nursery, and buying all the things that they need. And so many people are completely blindsided by the huge transition that having a baby brings, and are scrambling because they didn't expect this, or they don't have a good circle of support to ask questions, or people who can validate their early parenthood experience, who won't bat an eyelash at dropping a couple $100s on a nice stroller, but won't pay for the emotional support or the informational support that would really help them navigate their journey in a way that's much more empowering and much more fulfilling. And that really stuck with me. I'm not a businesswoman in background or at heart. it's a necessary part of doing the work if you want to be an entrepreneur, is running a business. But I will be honest, I really hate it. And I struggled to connect with individuals, like to market myself, to connect with people who wanted to pay for the services that I can provide. It's not where I shine. But I do see that disconnect. Yeah. Between what people say they want, but what they'll actually go and get. And it's been interesting to observe as I've now been offering this free support group we're just coming up to 2 years now. People who have been coming week after week still say they would not come if it wasn't free.
Mm-hmm. And they perhaps do have genuine barriers to access if that were, the case. That it's not, yeah. So what you described there around people, what they say and what they do being different, obviously that plays out in lots of areas. And I'm thinking of lots of previous roles that I've had working with people in the community development sector here in Australia, where my previous area of work was in the resettlement of migrant and refugee women and children. And so there's lots of sort of service provision and all of that sort of stuff. And just sort of running services and programs and courses and trying to get things up off the ground when there's a lot of interest, but then it doesn't often materialize in actual participation. So there's work to be done there about understanding what, as you said, what those barriers are. And I think also human nature, we can be very enthusiastic about things, but life is busy and life is hectic and often unpredictable, particularly with young children. So, we might actually be really intending to participate, but then something just gets in the way. Okay. So I'm interested also how many children, you said you have 4 children, Sara, and how old are they now?
My oldest is 9 and then 7, 5, and 4.
Okay. So you've got your hands very much full. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So I'm curious to know, before you became the postpartum doula, what was the background even before sort of birth came into your sphere or postpartum? I did see that what did you say? Something with animals. You're working with animals. I'm just trying to find those notes.
So, as an I thought I wanted to be a writer, and which is interesting because in fact I've come back to writing inside of my birth work. But at the very last moment, I changed my mind and decided I wanted to go to school for animal science, and I earned an undergraduate degree in animal science and agriculture science and technology. And then a master's in education because I wanted to work for the university through their extension system, which is a bridge between the university and the people out in the communities, to take the research and the knowledge and the education of the university out into local communities. And I did work for extension in that role for almost 10 years, full-time for a while. And then after I had children, I did contract back part-time, and I loved that work. It was very flexible. It was very interesting to me. Particularly my focus was in livestock physiology and pasture management, which is not related to birth work at all. But I loved the science aspect.
I wonder, is it or is it not?
Well, in some respects, the reproduction courses were the most interesting to me, and animal breeding plans. And actually, when I was in college, I worked at a birthing center where it was a public education type of thing. So we were teaching people about how mammals are born, essentially, which was very eye-opening to be working with the public. Public is watching animals give birth. We're describing the process. Lots of questions, even from parents themselves. And that was one thing I really loved. That was one of my favorite experiences from college, was that connecting people with information about how their own bodies work. I mean, we're mammals as well. So obviously people aren't cows and pigs, but the processes are similar. And even mothers who have children were learning a lot just by observing and watching and listening. I worked in agriculture for all that time. And my husband and I live on a small farm, and we do some side projects. We're not full-time farmers by any means, but that's kind of the community and the background that I came from, and moving into birth work was really a complete shift. I certainly pull from my previous trainings, but the content area is quite different.
And you said in your things that you submitted to me earlier that you didn't imagine finding yourself here, or you wouldn't have been able to predict that you would be in this area of work.
No way. I, as a younger person, didn't really care for babies and children, just wasn't my thing. Never was around any. I was an only child until I was 12 years old, and my sister was born when I was 12. But, preteen and teenager, I didn't absorb anything of being around babies. It wasn't my jam. And I wanted my own children. And I remember thinking to myself, biology will make me love them, right? Because like I was never a children person, and becoming a parent myself completely changed me in that way. Now I'm very interested in parents and babies and feeding and like baby reflexes, like it's just fascinating to me. And never before becoming a parent did I really have any interest in human anatomy, physiology. Like that just wasn't interesting to me, but now it really is.
Yeah, it's interesting how we change, isn't it? I'm curious to know what some of the most frequent questions you used to hear from parents who were watching these animals birth.
Oh.
What were the things that were the most prominent that people were surprised about or intrigued about?
You're asking me to mind back about 15 years, but
okay.
I remember the questions that were shocking more than the questions that were common. And I remember someone who asked if there was a sow, a mama pig laying with her piglets, and she asked if the babies came out of that end or that end, pointing to the mouth end and the back end. And she had some children in a stroller with her, presumably her own. So trying to hold space and not judge, but really surprised that there really is such a huge disconnect between so many people between these very like integral life processes that they're living every day, that they still don't quite understand how their own bodies work. And I all the time and realizing things that I don't understand about how my own body works. So I get that.
Yeah. Hearing that over here too, very much on a journey of discovering things about my own body as well that I've not understood for years and years and years. But yeah, that's an interesting question. It reminds me of the way that, of course we don't know what we don't know, and often we're not interested in things that are not relevant to us. Like we may not be interested in children or babies until we become pregnant or want to become pregnant. And so even the processes of ovulation that a lot of women don't understand until they're trying to conceive, and they might be in their 30s and they've never understood what it actually means to be a cyclical being and what it means to ovulate. Yeah, it sounds really interesting. So I know you said that the two roles are not related, but do you see what other crossovers that you see between that previous work with animals and the work with that you do now?
Oh, sure.
Is it the education predominantly, or?
Well, I'm thinking, I've been actually reflecting on this myself of why I love animals so much. I used to have livestock. Now I have children, so I don't have outside animals because, I'm only one person, but still having like dogs and cats in my house is really important to me. And I think I realized it's because the way that you have to relate with animals to kind of get on their same level requires a lot of emotional regulation. And I never realized this until like very recently. So when I was in a career with animals, I didn't quite get it at that time. But you have to have some very great self-mastery if you want to earn a horse's trust, or work with, a dog that's been traumatized or a feral cat and try to tame them, and help rehabilitate. You have to be very conscious of your own emotional state so that you can invite them and earn their trust. And that's something that I'm seeing reflected now in my work with parents is you must be able to regulate yourself if you want them to be able to trust you and be vulnerable with you and share things so that you can in turn help them regulate their emotional state. And it's really a learned skill that I had learned when I was doing a lot of work with animals, but never realized. It was never explained to me that like that in that way. And I never just conceptualized it. It was just kind of the thing that I knew how to do. And then when I started working with people, it was a long time before I realized that skill could translate until I specifically learned about your own emotional regulation and helping other people hitch a ride on your nervous system, and said, oh, well, I was doing that a long time ago with animals. And it just wasn't explained in those words in that industry.
Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting concept. And this one of, as you just said, hitching a ride on somebody else's nervous system, or being able to co-regulate or regulate ourselves to the degree that we can actually hold space adequately for somebody who needs that. And it's an interesting one. For me, it's interesting because I think about how many of us doing this work as doulas, and of course this applies to people in other care professions as well, caring for anybody who's marginalised and vulnerable, young people, older people, people with disabilities, and, it's all the same, is we're often actually under a lot of strain ourselves. We're often actually parents of young children and busy and chaotic family lives ourselves, and we often will transition from a like dropping a screaming child at daycare to get to a client's home in time, where our nervous systems might actually be quite, So it's so important to create spaces and transitionary practices that can help us move from one space to another without taking that dysregulated nervous system into the client's spaces. Do you have any tips on how people can do that, or what's your personal practice with that in your mindfulness and efforts to maintain your nervous system in such a state that you can actually allow people to hitch a ride on it with you?
Yeah, that's something I'm actively working on. I must be decent at it because of the response that I get. I probably am undercutting myself, but I am very self-aware of what I'm feeling in the moment. That's come with much, much practice. And so I can, most of the time, start to feel when I'm upregulating and catch it early. And breath work is really the most helpful thing for me, like diaphragmatic breathing. And then paying attention to like what's very grounding techniques, paying attention to like what's around me and seeing what I can notice, and being very intentional to be still and kind of like let myself be bored almost. Because I find that one thing that is challenging for me is addicted to stimulation. I think a lot of people can relate to that, especially in, our modern world where there's always things beeping and buzzing, and in a house with small children where someone is always crying and needing your attention. It can be hard to give yourself permission to shift down into a state where nothing is catching your attention because it's uncomfortable, because it's unfamiliar from, the constant overstimulation. And so when I start to feel that little bit of boredom, like that discomfort of the boredom, I have to say, oh, I'm on the right track, instead of distracting myself away to something else. So if someone's feeling is making me uncomfortable, and I am trying to like pay attention, like really pay attention to the feeling, but I'm starting to kind of get pulled like, this isn't quite right. I have to say, stay there, stay in it, and feel the discomfort, because like that's the way that you kind of drop down into that more present, orienting to what's in your space right now kind of headspace.
So staying in it and persevering through that feeling. Hi everyone, I'm just interrupting our conversation very briefly to tell you about my Intuitive Doula mentoring program, which is my signature mentoring container for fellow doulas that is a 9-month journey to help you develop more trust in your intuition and your unique offerings as a doula, so you can build your own heart-led business with the confidence that you need to thrive. But it's actually so much more than that as well. It's a program that explores how to work on yourself, how to work with clients, how to work with others, how to work with balance, how to work with boundaries, and how to work with intuition. And as I said, it's a 9-month program with live fortnightly calls. So it's 18 live group calls and interspersed with 18 videos that are shared, learning videos on topics within the framework that I just outlined. So the Intuitive Doula is perfect for you if you've completed your doula certification and are excited to support families to have more positive experiences, but you're not really sure how to take what you've learned and put it into practice with confidence. You might feel like you're trying to tick all of the boxes or deliver the same results for each family, or even turning up with a curriculum to your visits rather than walking into your visits with an open heart and an open mind and just trusting that the connection and the intuition will guide you to know how to support the families that you're working with. You're probably craving a deep and meaningful connection also with other doulas who are working in the space, and that you will certainly find in the Intuitive Doula. In fact, the women who journeyed through the program in 2023 described it as a course and a women's circle all tied into one. It was a really beautiful space. It's a safe circle of women and doulas to explore some of the really tricky and challenging topics of our work. And it's an intimate container. It's a small group. We meet for a long time and we really get to know each other well. So it's an opportunity to peel back the layers of our self-limiting beliefs and to be held accountable for those as we journey into the world of being better doulas in business. So if you're interested to know more about the Intuitive Doula program, please reach out to me at hello@marygiordano.com.au. You can also find that in the show notes. The 2024 program, the 9-month program, is starting in early March. So I'm calling out for some beautiful doulas that are called to join this cohort with me and with a group of others to journey together. So if you're interested, get in touch as soon as possible. Thank you so much. And here we will return to the show. So are you still working one-on-one with people, families, new families, or are you purely working in the not-for-profit now?
I am. I'm working still with families as the nonprofit ramps up. My attention kind of goes where the money is at the moment, because the nonprofit is at this point primarily grant funded, and so grants come and grants go, and sometimes it's dry. I have more space to lean into private practice, and sometimes we've got projects brewing in the nonprofit, and so it's kind of a fluid operation, but I am still doing both.
Yeah, beautiful. I'd love to hear also about you have been successful in getting some grants. Is that something that you've found really challenging, or is it something that you've been able to acquire? You said you've been in it's been officially an NGO for 18 months nearly. So have you been able to acquire grants and run the operations that you desire? It seems like how's that going, and where are you finding the grants? Are they community grants? Are they government grants? Are they private grants? Are they I've just lost the word, philanthropic grants, or where are they coming from?
I hear you. So it's been a little bit of both success and challenge. I actually enjoy grant writing. I like writing. I'm a strong writer, and so composing a grant is a fun activity for me. Finding grants is hard, particularly because they have open periods, and if you don't find them during the open period, you Google searching, you find a lot of stuff that's already passed. So being connected with the organizations that are offering the grants and having the timing right, particularly when you're a small staff that is largely volunteer run, the logistics of that are challenging. We were successful in getting a pretty large grant that funded us creating a volunteer training program that came from United Way, which is a philanthropic organization that helps to fund and support nonprofits in their missions as they're aligned with the United Way's mission. And that's pretty much where we've been. We've been turned down by several community grants, and otherwise we're still trying to figure out where they are and how we access them. I know they are there. We're just not quite connected in the right places yet. So it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, I hear you. And one of the reasons I asked is because I'm part of some groups here of fellow birth workers who are collectively trying to think about ways to generate income sources and grants for projects that we're trying to get off the ground. And it is really tricky. And sometimes some of the eligibility requires that we are actually an organisation as opposed to maybe a group of individuals. And there's a few barriers there, so it's just interesting to hear how others are navigating those efforts. So with the not-for-profit, I'm just looking again at the name,
Rooted Willow Community.
Rooted Willow Community. Yeah. So can you just explain what that looks like for the people who are participating? You said that there are some people who've been coming for a couple of years or for quite a long time. So is it just a once a week thing that you're offering, and what does it actually look like for them?
Sure. So our signature program is called After Baby Club, and it is essentially peer support. So that was the project that we started with, and is still the strongest program that we offer. So we have right now once a week in-person meeting and a once a week virtual meeting. So there's 2 meetings every week. And it's free to participate in all of the programs inside of After Baby Club. In addition to, we call these support circles. So in addition to the virtual and in-person support circle, we do a mom's night out once a month, and then some other play date meetups, meet at a playground or meet at a library, or once a month field trip targeted for moms and dads with toddlers and babies. So After Baby Club is kind of the biggest program where we have the most people. We have an affiliated Facebook group that has 700, I think, at this point. And we're mostly local, just to Harford County, which is near Baltimore, kind of a suburban area. There's a lot of parents here. In addition to After Baby Club, inside of the umbrella of Rooted Willow Community, we are also, we piloted a book club earlier this year and have plans to run a book club in cohort style 1 to 2 times per year. So we're planning for another relaunch of that starting in January. And we also have a small blog. So we're writing about topics that are relevant to parents, that are things that are ungoogleable. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, but a platform for parents to share stories and for parents to see others in their community showcased for, just the awesome things that parents do just living through their day-to-day life. Everybody has some kind of story, and it's cool to see the perspective from somebody who maybe you've seen coming to group week after week, but when they have a chance to write about, having twins or starting a business as a new mom, kind of gives you that, oh, that's really cool. I never knew that about Samantha.
So much more to them than what you see in that weekly space.
Right.
That's a lot of activities to be providing. And so you said you have a volunteer team as well. How many people do you have supporting these efforts as volunteers?
Yes. So currently right now, Erica and I provide the leadership, and then we have a mom who runs the After Baby Club, like the Facebook group and the Mom's Night Out. Another mom is running the book club and the social play dates. And then another mom is the editor of the blog. So we've got this team, besides the leadership, this team of 3. And we have launched our volunteer training program now. And we have 12, I think it's 12. It might be 11 or 13 parents in this training program right now. They'll finish up at the end of September, beginning of October. And then we will increase our volunteer base by about 200%. So I'm really excited and a little bit apprehensive. Tempering growth has been a very important piece of the puzzle for us, that we cannot grow faster than we have the capacity to support. So it's been a delicate dance, but we are about to get several more people on board, which is really exciting.
Yeah. So yeah, that is really exciting. I was going to ask where you see the direction of the organisation moving, sort of where you're driving it to, but you touched on that a little bit, but perhaps you can share what your vision is for the future, maybe in the next 2, 3, 5 years, or even beyond, if you've gone that far in your mind. Where is it going?
Well, our organizational goal is that we are an automatic referral from the maternity providers in the county. You need resources, start here, so that we are at least, people know that we are there and that these resources are there for them, and that these are ways to connect with other moms. We have seen a lot of the positives and negatives of moms trying to connect with each other on social media, which is primarily, aside from in-person groups like this, the way that moms are trying to connect with each other. And the quality of the interaction is nowhere near what it is when moms are together in person. And so I would love for more people to be utilizing these peer networks, and for us to gain credibility, momentum, and funding so we can continue to provide more support circles. We do have plans to grow to additional locations, and that's really a funding dependent kind of activity. We're moving in positive directions. But so I think on the surface, I say we have more groups so that more people can access what we have to offer. But organizationally, our board of directors is still deciding, like, where do we want to go? How far do we want to grow? Or do we want to stay local and like replicate the model in different ways? And we're not sure. We have to finish building what we're building first before we know what it looks like. And it's kind of we're oriented in a certain direction, but we don't know, we want to keep moving towards a vision, but we really don't know what's going to be built until it's being built. Because we have to, and we thrive on capturing the momentum of what the volunteers bring to us. We have priorities and ideas and visions of where we want to go, but when we're almost completely volunteer funded, we need these people to have buy-in and have interest. And so we're kind of advertising this, and honestly so, as, we have structure to give your passion a place to grow. I want people who want to make a difference to be able to come in and do what they want to do with us supporting them. And then what they're doing is supporting our goal, because I think that's the way that we make the greatest impact.
And is there a vision for sort of using these volunteers and these initiatives that the organisation has started as pathways to employment for some of these parents eventually? Or do you envision that there are volunteer base that you will sort of remain, largely dependent on volunteers, and that's not really part of the vision?
I think we're going to end up with a little bit of both, because to accomplish something of this caliber at the quality that it really deserves, it requires paid positions. But I also believe that part of the integrity of it is a volunteer peer-to-peer kind of initiative. So I think it's going to be a mix, and we're fleshing out some of those details now, as like we're getting to the place where we're transitioning to Erica and I being more compensated financially. We've invested a lot of volunteer hours, but we're just getting to the point where now we're making this financially sustainable for us to continue putting in at the level that we are. It's years out still before we can figure out a way to compensate kind of like our next level, our program managers. That is an ultimate goal. We would love to be able to give moms an opportunity to work in their community and be compensated for their labor, because I know these things their time is valuable and what they have to offer is valuable. And so there's a lot of ideas that are on the table, and still a lot more conversations to be had as we're kind of figuring out what's what with it.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I'm curious, with the After Baby Club peer support group, is that a facilitated group or is it just a casual meetup? And if it's facilitated, what's the duration? Is it ongoing, or is there, I know you said it has been ongoing, but are there cohorts that sort of start and end and then they can keep coming, or is it just open all the time?
Yeah, we're just open. So anyone is invited. Our focus is parents who are pregnant and parents with babies 1-year-old and under. But we found that a lot of parents, we're not kicking anyone out. It becomes, for the people who keep coming, it becomes really important to a lot of them. And now that some of these people who've been coming are pregnant again with now a second child, and so they've been coming all this time, and now they've had the support through their conception and pregnancy, and will already be in place immediately postpartum. And yes, we are facilitated. So our meetings are usually about 1 hour and 45 minutes. We've found that is the length of time that the babies allow us to sit and talk, or the toddlers. Every week, it's kind of interesting. At 1 hour, 45-minute mark, you can tell the kids are done.
It's enough.
The moms would stay and talk all day, but the kids are done. So it's a helpful way to end the meeting. And then our Tuesday meeting is peer facilitated, and our Wednesday meeting is co-facilitated by myself and Erica, who's a mental health specialist. So we have a doula, lactation counselor, and mental health professional in the room.
And what are some of the topics? You say it's ongoing. So do the topics kind of, are they cyclical that you just sort of, or are they just changing every week? And what are some of the topics and the themes that you focus on, aside from the lactation consultancy and mental health, but other things? What else do you talk about? What do you focus on?
It's really an open forum. The moms share what moms want to share. So the structure, the loose structure we use is that we'll go around and each person will share a rose and a thorn from their past week or week-ish. So a rose being something that they're celebrating, and a thorn being something challenging or that they're seeking support on, or a leaf, a neutral but significant item. And so each person has an opportunity to share, and then I try to let organic conversation flow while also kind of being the timekeeper and making sure that everybody gets a chance to share. So it's different every week, but it's what's important to the people, and the same things do come up frequently. I'm surprised how little of breastfeeding questions we actually get, because in our area, most of the support groups that are being offered are focused breastfeeding support groups. And as a lactation professional also, I don't undervalue the importance of that. But it's curious to me that in a group where we're offering breastfeeding support, that's not even one of the topics that people are often bringing to us. It's a lot of what we deal with is there's a lot about family and boundaries with parents, the new parents kind of looking at their relationship with their own parents and how that's changed now that they've become parents. So there's a lot of family stuff, which is really validating, because, you think, my family's messed up. Well, hearing everybody else's stories, like everybody's family has stuff going on. So it's helped me feel better even about my own situations, just knowing that everybody's dealing with stuff. So a lot of it's not even really baby or kid focused. It's really like life focused, and these are the things that are challenging. Sometimes my baby's not sleeping. That's a big one. But it's more so like, these are the things that I'm struggling with. And then people say, that's really hard. I'm there too.
Yeah, which is validating. Yeah. It sounds very similar. I actually run a support group, a 10-week support group for new mums in my town, and I call it the Motherhood, and we meet for 10 consecutive weeks for 2 hours. It tends to move towards 2.5, but it's in my living room, and that they just sort of manage the babies. It's up to 6 months old because I want them to be not mobile yet, because that takes it into a whole other territory. But we cover, it's facilitated, and I have 10 themes, and one of which is, the boundaries with families, realistic expectations, the good enough parent concept, people-pleasing tendencies, and, finding space for self and partnership, and lots of other things that are really pertinent to our experiences as we're transitioning into families with, adding children to the families. And they are conversations that I hear over and over again that they just don't get to have in other spaces. Where they can have them. So, for example, the last cohort, I had 2 mums who had been in the same parents group. Our local councils organise, local government areas organise new parents groups at around 6 weeks postpartum that are facilitated groups that run for 6 weeks, and they're facilitated by maternal child health nurses, and they tend to be focused on developmental related topics that are relevant to baby, really more so than the mother's experience. So 2 of the mums had been through the parents group together, and then after the very first session or first week of the motherhood, they stood up and said, "I've learnt more about you in 2 hours than we did in 6 weeks together in this other group." And so it's really the connections that they form in this space are profound and deep and really meaningful to whole of life. And as you said before, they are life skills and things that impact the way that we show up in our motherhood and life way beyond birth and immediate postpartum. And of course, we know postpartum is forever, but yeah, such meaningful spaces. And it's really, just interesting to hear how that's done in different parts, different places. So I hear that you've got a board of directors, and you're currently still figuring out whether you can replicate this model in other places or how it will look moving forward. But of course, you're wanting to really improve and perfect, if you like, if that's even possible, the current offerings and the current sort of programs and setup before you expand further. But with the vision potentially of offering eventually employment pathways to some of the volunteers, probably not all, I imagine, but also sustainable income for yourself and Erica in order to continue the work in a way that you can in an ongoing manner. So yeah, it's really been interesting to hear about your journey. And also I'm reflecting on how that can be challenging for people in business who are wanting to maybe, create a business plan or have a vision for business for the future and, building something that's sustainable. I definitely understand what you're saying and appreciate that, and also understand that can be challenging for people in business to allow themselves to just lean into that, I suppose, the serendipitous nature of life and the way that things come to us and our ability to respond at the moment and pivot. And yeah, I'm actually pivoting in my business now and don't have the same interests that I had 5 years ago. And it's a challenge because I also wonder what I'm interested in developing now. Will I still be interested in that in 5 years' time? I don't know. So yeah, I love it. Thank you so much for your time, Sara. It's been lovely chatting with you today. Thank you so much for listening to my conversation with Sara this morning. It was really interesting to me to hear where she came from in her life's work before becoming a doula or postpartum doula, and how that work has transitioned into the support that she's building for her community with the not-for-profit that she has founded. It was really interesting to hear that and the direction that she's going in and the vision for the future. So I hope you also enjoyed listening, and you can join us again for another episode of the Whole Doula podcast in 2 weeks' time.